Good afternoon, folks. My name is Bea Brusk, and I'm the President of the Canadian Labour Congress. I'm joined today by the leadership of Canada's unions. Together, we represent well over 3 million workers in every sector of Canada's economy. Today, we are holding our Canadian Council meeting, a meeting where all heads of unions come together to strategize the work ahead. A top-of-mind for us issue right now is the massive job losses that Canada's workers are experiencing right across the country. Trump's trade war is targeting key sectors of our economy, leading to significant job losses. And at the same time, we see governments tightening their belts and cutting jobs, despite the country's need for stronger public services. We are here today to call for a worker-first, comprehensive economic strategy to protect and create good union jobs across Canada. I will call on a number of labour leaders to speak on the issues facing their members in their sectors across the country. Firstly, we will hear from the National President of Unifor, Lana Payne.
I'm a little bit taller. Good afternoon, everyone. And first, a big thank you to Bea and the Canadian Labour Congress for this invitation. It's really great to be here. I'm here today on behalf of 320,000 Unifor members, 1/3 of whom work in trade-exposed areas of the economy. This includes manufacturing, auto assembly and parts plants in Ontario, heavy-duty truck and bus plants in Quebec and Manitoba. It includes aluminum smelters and fabrication plants in Quebec and British Columbia. It includes workers who make lumber and wood products at sawmills and pulp and paper mills and furniture factories from Atlantic Canada to British Columbia. It also includes aerospace, aircraft and component parts plants in Halifax and Montreal and Toronto and Winnipeg and Abbotsford and everywhere in between. Each of these workplaces represent the manufacturing backbone of local communities and our entire country. A manufacturing backbone coupled with rich resources in energy and minerals so that we can actually build things here in Canada. Canada is a nation of builders and skilled workers, the best, the very best at what they do, standing on the shoulders of the workers who came before them, who waged big fights for economic and social justice through their unions, through these unions, and who go to work every single day to build the things we need right here at home. But right now, all of that is under threat. I've spent more than a year sharing this message to anyone who will listen. To date, literally thousands of Unifor members have lost their jobs or have had their plants, mills, and factories idled in the forestry sector, in the auto sector, and last week, more threats to the workers we represent in the aerospace sector. They are the front lines of this trade war. They are fighting every single day to protect their jobs, their plants, their communities, and yes, the industrial economy of this country. Losing manufacturing in Canada means losing the very capacity to build a strong Canadian economy of our own. And that's not something that our union is willing to cede. Donald Trump says very clearly that he doesn't need the things that Canada makes. Well, we know the difference. We know the difference. He needs our aluminum to build things. He needs our potash to grow things. He needs our energy, and so much more. He surely needs Canadians to keep buying American products. We are, after all, their #1 export market. And make no mistake, his economic plan is devastating for Canadian workers and for our economy, but for his too. Workers on both sides of the border are paying the price. The U.S. manufacturing base right now is shrinking under the weight of his tariffs. I want to be very clear. It was important that Canada did not sign a bad trade deal with the United States last year, as other countries did. It was important to understand that this time, tariffs would have consequences on the U.S. economy, and we are now starting to see that. But that does not change the fact that we also need a durable resolve to this trade dispute, whether that comes through a renegotiation of CUSMA or not. A true resolution can only come from unity and solidarity across the political divide, across this country, across our labor movement, across sectors, and across workplaces. It is perhaps not a surprise to us as trade unionists that a resolution will always come from a place of solidarity and not division. That is why we are all standing here today. Public and private sector workers united for a strong and resilient Canadian economy. Recently, Prime Minister Carney defended Canada on the world stage. He spoke out on the state of the geopolitics of our world and called on world leaders to cease the appeasement of the U.S. president and to start working together in common interest. We agree with the Prime Minister. We need countries to come together and push back against the United States because the task ahead is immense. Immense. In the face of financial crisis, I want to be very clear. In the face of financial crisis, the answer is not austerity and cuts to critical jobs and services. In the face of industrial crisis and job loss, the answer is not more so-called free trade deals that leave workers behind. In the face of turmoil, our governments and elected representatives can choose old ways or create a new world order, one with workers at the center of it. Canada can meet this moment. I truly believe that we can. We must develop strong, meaningful industrial strategies with workers at the table. We can take actions against companies that move their businesses out of our country. And yes, we can very clearly demand that if corporations are going to sell their products in Canada, then they must build here as well. We can build the things we need here at home, like public transit and so much more, while creating good union Canadian jobs. We can reconcile the needs of working people today with a vision for a strong, resilient, competitive, and caring Canada on a constantly changing world stage. All of that is possible. This is the Canada that we believe in. This is the Canada that we are going to continue to fight for. On behalf of Unifor members, thank you very much, and solidarity.
I would now like to invite Mark Hancock, the National President of the Canadian Union of Public Employees.
Good afternoon. My name is Mark Hancock, and I'm the National President of CUPE, representing over 800,000 members all across this country from coast to coast to coast. It is my absolute honor to join friends from across the labor movement, representing millions of workers across Canada. We're calling for a worker-focused and a people-centered response to the United States causing the turmoil and chaos in our world order these days. We really need governments that, at every level, to stop pretending that the market alone will fix this crisis. It won't. The CEOs on Bay Street are happy to keep bowing down to American fascism as long as the profits keep rolling in. The challenges that we face is to preserve a Canada worth living in. Let's be clear about what that means and what's at stake. American corporate interests, backed by an increasingly aggressive imperial approach to trade, see Canada's public services and natural resources as untapped markets. They want to privatize our health care. They want to siphon off our water and run roughshod over Indigenous rights and title. They want to extract profit from services that Canadians built together with our labor and with our collective resources. They want to rob us of the very things that make up our national identity and the lifeblood of our communities. I'm here today to tell you that that just isn't going to happen. Our public services are not bargaining chips. Our water, our healthcare, our infrastructure, and our natural resources are public goods, not the opportunities for corporations to pillage and loot. We all heard the Prime Minister's speech in Switzerland, and he named some hard truths about the times that we're living in. One that stood out to me in particular was his call to rely not just on our values, but on the things that make us strong. In a country as diverse and as expansive as Canada, our public services and our social safety net are precisely what make us strong. Knowing a trip to the hospital isn't going to bankrupt a family makes us strong. Knowing our public pension system will keep our parents and our grandparents from falling into poverty as they age makes us strong. Keeping Canada strong in these shaky times means defending the bedrock institutions that make us who we are, not abandoning them. It means public investment that strengthens communities, not corporate subsidies with no strings attached, that leave working people high and dry once the gold rush ends. It also means standing up for human rights consistently. Trade should reflect our values, not undermine them. And finally, keeping Canada strong means defending our sovereignty. Real sovereignty isn't about slogans or flag waving. It's about having the democratic power to decide our own future, to protect public services, regulate in the public interest, and to build an economy that works for people. Workers build this country. Public services are what holds it together, and neither of those things are for sale. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I would now like to invite Marty Warren, National Director of the Steelworkers Canada.
Thank you, Bea. Good afternoon. As Bea said, my name is Marty Warren. I'm the National Director of the United Steelworkers Union. We represent over 225,000 members across Canada, and many of these are in the trade-exposed areas. We're steel, aluminum, forestry, mining, energy, and a wide range of industrial jobs, manufacturing, critical to Canada's economy and sovereignty. I'm proud to be here today alongside our labor allies, speaking with one voice for working people across this country. It has now been 1 year since Donald Trump has took office. The Canadian workers are feeling the impact of a trade war through tariffs, market instability, layoffs, and growing uncertainty in the communities that depend on strong domestic industries. Once again, workers are paying the price for trade decisions that put politics and corporate interests ahead of people in the communities. Canadian workers should not be asked to pay the price for trade instability, nor should they be sacrificed to unfair global competition that weakens our industrial base. There is another way forward. There is another way forward, a worker-centered, job-centered trade strategy rooted in real industrial policy that protects domestic production, expands industrial capacity here at home, strengthens public services workers rely on, and supports communities coast to coast to coast. For steelworkers, this is not a theory, it's a reality. We've seen firsthand the damage caused by unfair trade, state-subsidized overcapacity, dumping, and weak trade enforcement that destroys communities in thousands of good union jobs. Our industrial economy is not just another line in a trade balance sheet. It's critical to our infrastructure, our economy, security, and our sovereignty. When industrial capacity disappears, so does our ability to shape our future. Diversification matters, but it must be done responsibly. Canada cannot build its future on weakened labor and environmental standards, or by exposing Canadian workers to unfair competition. Today, the labor movement is united in demanding trade and investment policies that work for workers. Workers first policies, policies that deliver good union jobs, fair wages, long-term economic security, not short-term fixes that leave working people behind. On behalf of the Steelworkers, thank you.
I would now like to invite up Sharon D'Souza, President of the Public Service Alliance of Canada.
Thank you, Bea. And as Bea mentioned, my name is Sharon D'Souza, and I am the National President of the Public Service Alliance of Canada, representing over 245,000 members coast to coast to coast. Public service workers are the backbone of trade and industrial policies to protect domestic industry, enforce labor standards, strengthen supply chains, or respond to economic shocks. You need public service workers to make it happen. Prime Minister Carney has acknowledged this. He recently said public services are inherent to Canada's values and foundation. And yet, at the very moment when Canada needs capacity, coordination, and expertise, this government is choosing to dismantle that very foundation. Over the next 3 years, the federal government plans to eliminate another 30,000 public service jobs. In the last 2 months alone, 10,000 PSAC members received notices that their jobs may be at risk, and thousands of workers represented by the Professional Institute of the Public Service of Canada and Canadian Association of Professional Employees are facing the same threat. Public service cuts just don't affect government workers. They impact businesses, private sector unions, and communities across Canada. The systems of our economy depend on are deeply interconnected. When public service capacity is weakened, delays, disruptions, and uncertainty spread across the economy, and everyone feels it. Airport workers across the country maintain the infrastructure that keeps goods moving efficiently. Border service officers enable the cross-border trade that many industrial sectors depend on. Federal inspectors ensure products meet safety and quality standards before they reach consumers, keeping our communities safe. Intellectual property staff help businesses secure patents and trademarks, providing the certainty they need to innovate and grow. Analysts support industrial policy, research funding, and trade agreements that businesses rely on to plan investments and adopt new technologies. Research staff provide critical knowledge that allows sectors like manufacturing, automotive, and agriculture to adopt new practices and technologies. When trade chaos leads to job losses, it's federal workers who process employment insurance benefits and support people through economic uncertainty. Public services aren't just a budget line, they're a lifeline. When government cuts public service jobs, it slows services, disrupts supply chains, weakens regulatory oversight, and undermines the capacity businesses and communities depend on. Treating public service workers as expendable is not a winning strategy. That's why PSAC is proud to join the labor movement in calling for a worker-centered trade strategy. If this government is serious about a stronger, fair, more resilient Canada, it must invest in public services, respect workers, and choose a worker-centered path forward. Thank you.
And now I'd like to invite David Chartrand, General Vice President of the IAM and the Machinists Union in Canada.
Bear with me a minute. I'm a little bit taller than B. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is David Chartrand. I'm the Canadian General Vice President for the IAM, a union, international union in North America. We represent 600,000 members. And coast to coast to coast here in Canada, many of the sectors that you heard previously from Lana, from Marty, we represent members, whether it be air transportation, aerospace, auto, bus making, manufacturing, healthcare even. So we also are proud to be here today to be able to speak to you on behalf of our members in the IAM. We're here today because Canada's at a crossroads. In Canada, we have values such as democracy, equality, freedom, and human rights, and a deep appreciation for the environment. We're being told there's only two positions, two options that are there on the table. Either we accept Trump-style trade chaos and tariff wars, or chase cheap production by deepening our ties with countries that rely on forced labor and state-subsidized overcapacity. Workers reject this false choice. We're here to say clearly there's a third path. A national worker-centered trade strategy that protects domestic industry, strengthens our communities, upholds human rights, and reinforces Canada's sovereignty. What this means, workers must come first, always. Trade agreements and investments must protect jobs, wages, and domestic production. We can't sacrifice one sector or an industry for the benefit of another. Second, domestic industry is national security. Our public services, our auto sector, steel, energy, advanced manufacturing, aerospace, and so on, are not just economic activities. They're strategic assets. When we undermine them, we weaken Canada's economic independence and resilience. Third, we can't have trade at any cost. Canada cannot claim to defend human rights while entering agreements that deepen our reliance on forced labor and state-subsidized overcapacity. Our values must shape our trade policy, not the other way around. I can give an example how important making these trade deals are and doing them properly. In our quest, our haste to try to make deals with other different partners and diversify the partners that we have, we still have to make sure that we defend our core values as Canadians, that we defend workers' rights. I can use as an example in the aerospace industry. On a number of occasions, you heard that the Trump administration was talking about putting tariffs on the aerospace industry. How many times did you hear that they could not do that because we were CUSMA compliant? Although CUSMA might not be perfect, it did have some protections in there that protected us so far. So it's important to really, not do things too hastily, make sure that the trade deals are good, and that we're not just making any trade deal just to try to diversify our partnerships and sacrificing certain sectors, certain jobs, and things like that. Fourth, diversification must strengthen alliances. Undermine them. Yes, Canada needs to diversify beyond our dependence to the United States, but diversification can't mean a race to the bottom. We should not water down labor standards, environmental protections, or human rights commitments. In our country's quest to find new trading partners to sign deals faster. Strategic diversification means aligning Canada with democratic partners who share our values and coordinating industrial strategies that lift workers up across the borders. It means entering agreements carefully with workers at the table and Canada's strongest industries in mind. The labor movement is united on this. We want ambition, we want nation building, we want Canada to succeed in a changing global economy. If this government is serious about industrial renewal, then workers and unions must be at the table from day one. We need enforceable labor standards, job guarantees on public investment, and domestic plans that put shovels in the ground and people to work right away. Canada doesn't need to choose between chaos and exploitation. Workers deserve better, and we're here to build it. Now, I don't have notes in French, but I was told and asked if I could maybe speak in French, so I will try to do automatic translation. You can call me Google Translate if you want, but I'm going to try to do the best that I can. So at least for the benefit of our French-speaking Canadians from coast to coast to coast, that we also get the same message. On est ici aujourd'hui au Canada. On a des valeurs telles que la démocratie, l'égalité, les droits humains et la liberté. Et nous avons aussi une grosse appréciation là, pour l'environnement. On se fait dire qu'il n'y a seulement que deux options. Soit que l'on accepte un accord de libre-échange du style Trump, le chaos et des tarifs, des guerres de tarifs, ou on court après de la production à faible coût, en renforçant nos liens avec des pays qui se fient sur du travail forcé, sur du travail pas bien rémunéré, sur des conditions de travail qui sont faibles. Les travailleurs rejettent que c'est les seuls choix que nous avons. On est ici pour dire clairement qu'il y a un troisième chemin, il y a une troisième façon de faire les choses. Une stratégie nationale centrée sur les travailleurs et les travailleuses qui protège l'industrie domestique, qui renforce nos communautés, qui défend les droits humains et qui renforce la souveraineté du Canada. Ce que ceci veut dire, premièrement, les travailleurs doivent toujours être en avant, en premier lieu. Les ententes et les investissements doivent protéger les emplois, les salaires, la production domestique. On ne peut pas sacrifier un secteur ou une industrie pour le bénéfice d'un autre. Deuxièmement, l'industrie domestique, c'est la sécurité nationale. Nos services publics, notre secteur de l'automobile, de l'acier, de l'énergie et du manufacturier avancé, incluant l'aérospatial, ne sont pas seulement des activités économiques. C'est des avoirs stratégiques et nous ne devons pas, là j'essaie de trouver le mot pour undermine. Undermine, OK. OK. Quand on fait ça, on affaiblit l'indépendance économique et la résilience du Canada. Troisièmement, on ne peut pas avoir un accord de libre-échange à n'importe quel coût. Le Canada ne peut pas dire qu'il défend des droits humains quand il fait un accord avec un pays qui renforce notre reliance ou notre dépendance, si je voudrais, sur du travail forcé, des conditions de travail faibles ou qui ne respectent pas les droits des travailleurs et des travailleuses dans leur pays. J'ai utilisé comme exemple l'accord de libre-échange avec les États-Unis et le Mexique. Dernièrement, vous avez vu où Trump s'attaque au secteur aérospatial. Moi, je viens du secteur aérospatial. Vous avez vu qu'il menace de mettre des tarifs. Il le fait aussi, son administration le fait depuis quelques mois. Ce qui nous a sauvés jusqu'à date, ce qui protège des emplois, c'est qu'à tous les fois, le langage qui est à l'intérieur de cette entente-là faisait qu'on respectait l'entente de libre-échange, donc il ne pouvait pas imposer les tarifs qu'il voulait. Encore une fois, il menace le secteur, mais malgré ça, même si ce n'est pas la meilleure entente qu'il y a, ou il y a place à amélioration, on a quand même eu des protections. Cela démontre clairement qu'il est important de ne pas prendre ces ententes-là à la légère, se dépêcher vers une course vers le bas pour essayer d'avoir des ententes avec d'autres partenaires stratégiques, mais qu'on ne met pas du langage fort qui est selon nos valeurs canadiennes, en tant que Canadiens et Canadiennes. La diversification doit renforcer les alliances, pas les undermine, encore une fois. Sous-estimer ou les compromettre, excusez. Le Canada doit se diversifier au-delà de sa dépendance sur les États-Unis. Mais la diversification ne peut pas vouloir dire une course vers le bas. On ne devrait pas, je l'ai dit, je ne le répéterai pas, on ne devrait pas avoir des faibles accords de libre-échange. On devrait les faire comme il faut. La diversification stratégique veut dire aligner le Canada avec des partenaires démocratiques qui partagent nos valeurs et de coordonner nos stratégies industrielles qui soulèvent les travailleurs et les travailleurs des deux côtés de la frontière. Ça veut dire faire attention à comment est-ce qu'on procède pour rentrer dans ces ententes-là ou faire ces ententes-là. avec les travailleurs toujours à la table à partir de la première journée. Le Canada ne peut pas succéder s'ils ne le font pas dans une économie qui change globalement comme en ce moment. Le mouvement ouvrier est uni sur ceci. On veut de l'ambition, on veut des choses qui vont bâtir la nation, on veut que le Canada succède. Si le gouvernement est sérieux au sujet de renouveler sa stratégie industrielle, les travailleurs et les travailleuses et les syndicats doivent être à la table à partir de la première journée. On a besoin des lois du travail qui sont fortes. On a besoin des garanties sur le travail, de l'investissement au niveau du public et des plans domestiques qui vont mettre des pelles dans la terre puis qui vont mettre le monde au travail immédiatement. Le Canada n'a pas besoin de choisir entre le chaos et l'exploitation des travailleurs. On mérite mieux, puis on est ici pour le bâtir. Au nom de l'AIM et de tout le mouvement ouvrier, je vous remercie.
Thank you, David. As you've just heard from industrial, manufacturing, private sector unions, and public sector unions, we are at a real turning point for Canada's economy. For decades, governments have told workers that if we opened markets, if we cut rules, if we helped corporations compete globally, that prosperity would trickle down. We tried that in the 1990s. What we got were plant closures, hollowed out communities, precarious work, and public services that are stretched to the breaking point. Workers warned about this then, and we were right. And today, the world is changing yet again. Global trade is more unstable. The U.S. has stepped away from a rules-based system, and Canada is scrambling to respond. By signing new trade deals without a plan and handing out subsidies without job guarantees, it just repeats the same failed playbook. We've seen what happens when governments write blank checks. They take money, and when profits shift, they shut the doors and leave the workers behind. Canada's unions are saying very clearly that that approach is over. No trade deal is better than a bad trade deal. Governments must be prepared to walk away from a bad trade deal. Canadians deserve to know exactly what's in the trade deals, exactly what their government has agreed to, and politicians need to be accountable to Canadians and to cast a vote on these trade deals. We need a worker-centered economic strategy, one that treats trade as a tool to build the Canadian industry, not as an end in and of itself, one that recognizes resilient public services that are a strategic asset and not costs. That means no trade deal without domestic plans for jobs and communities, and it has to mean enforceable labor standards and job guarantees on public investments. It means investing in manufacturing and the public service workers that families and individuals rely on, things like our healthcare system, childcare, education, transit, and housing. We recognize that Prime Minister Carney is speaking about ambition, speaking about industrial renewal, and Canada's role in this changing global economy. That ambition matters. But if we are going to get this right, it has to be built with workers and unions at the table so that we do not repeat the mistakes of the past, growth for corporations and instability for everyone else. And that means that we move with pace on domestic investments and get shovels in the ground on nation-building projects so that our trades folks can be at work, putting people at work right away, not just getting rhetoric. It also means that workers, families, and communities cannot just continue to be the adjustment mechanism for poorly designed trade deals and for economic measures. Labor is very much willing to work with government to build an economy that is resilient, prosperous, and fair, and we are ready to organize to make sure that that happens. So thank you, and we're ready to take any questions any of you have for any of us. If you could state your question and to whom.
We have no questions online, in person.
OK. Juliane Lapointe de Radio-Canada pour les francophones à qui vous avez parlé tout à l'heure. On est quand même un an, là, je ne sais pas à qui m'adresser parce que je pense qu'il n'y a pas beaucoup de francophones. À qui je pose la question, à vous?
Moi, ça va aller mieux juste parler comme ça que d'essayer de traduire une feuille.
Oui, oui, mais ma question est en français, donc une réponse en français serait appréciée. Ça fait quand même plus qu'1 an qu'on a l'incertitude causée par les tarifs, par les accords commerciaux. Vous arrivez aujourd'hui en disant on est unis, on a un plan, on veut que les choses changent, mais vous, les syndicats, depuis plus d'1 an, malgré vos efforts, il y en a eu des pertes d'emploi. Qu'est-ce que vous amenez de nouveau, de concret aujourd'hui pour que les choses changent et pour que les travailleurs payent moins le prix, comme vous le dites?
Ce qui est clair, c'est qu'on veut être assis à la table, on veut discuter avec le gouvernement. Quand il vient le temps de faire un accord de libre-échange, quand il vient le temps de prendre des ententes comme ça, qu'on soit capable de donner c'est quoi le point de vue des travailleurs et des travailleuses, qu'on soit capable d'expliquer notre opinion sur comment est-ce qu'on pourrait faire pour avoir une entente comme ça, mais qui ne sacrifie pas un secteur versus un autre. Oui, il y a eu des pertes d'emploi. Les syndicats, qu'est-ce qu'ils ont fait? Ils se sont battus pour qu'il y ait des programmes pour défendre les travailleurs et travailleuses, des programmes de transition. On veut bâtir une économie résiliente, beaucoup plus résiliente, locale, pour on achète des fois de l'aluminium d'ailleurs. Pourquoi qu'on n'achète pas notre aluminium du Canada? Au niveau du bois, quand on la regarde, l'industrie du bois d'œuvre, on pourrait créer beaucoup plus d'emplois au lieu de faire des mises à pied. Si on transformerait le bois aussi, on ne ferait pas seulement que le couper puis l'envoyer ailleurs pour le faire transformer. Donc, il y a plusieurs choses qu'on pourrait faire ici au Canada si les syndicats pourraient être assis avec le gouvernement pour bâtir notre économie de façon plus résiliente et ne pas sacrifier un secteur pour un autre.
Si je peux me permettre d'ajouter, ça va? Bonjour, Magali Picard, je suis la présidente de la FTQ au Québec. Il y a un paquet de choses qu'on peut faire avec les gouvernements. On le fait déjà dans plusieurs tables où on a des consultations, mais ce qu'on peut aussi amener, c'est l'idée d'aller vers de la 2e, 3e transformation. On a tout ce qu'il faut. On prend souvent nos ressources naturelles qui sont une mine d'or, puis on envoie ça se faire transformer aux États-Unis. Pourquoi on ne le fait pas ici? Ça préserverait des emplois. On a la main-d'œuvre, on a la ressource naturelle, on peut faire ça. Il y a aussi, David vous parlait du bois. Il y a des tarifs qui existent depuis plus de 30 ans au Canada avec les États-Unis, où il y a une partie du bois que l'on envoie aux États-Unis, où il y a de l'argent qui est mis en fiducie par le gouvernement américain parce qu'ils ont peur qu'on envoie de la marchandise qui n'est pas de qualité. On négocie actuellement avec le gouvernement canadien pour que le gouvernement canadien soit part de la fiducie de ces montants-là. On connaît nos secteurs d'activité. On est prêt à travailler avec les gouvernements. Il faut le faire. On doit, vous le disiez, on est tous unis. Oui, on est unis. Pourquoi? Parce que c'est sans précédent ce qu'on vit actuellement. Et il faut absolument travailler différemment. Et c'est ce qu'on offre au gouvernement. Puis quand on parle amener des idées, c'est ce qu'on fait depuis le début. On a siégé avec, au départ, le ministre McKinnon sur la réforme de l'assurance-emploi pour aider les premiers travailleurs qui ont été touchés. On est arrivé à amener des voies de passage, des solutions qui, encore maintenant, donnent un coup de main à ceux qui sont les premiers touchés. Donc, on le répète, on est vraiment là de bonne foi. C'est pas de trouver des coupables, on sait tous qui est le coupable. Le coupable actuellement, c'est qui est au sud de la frontière, c'est Donald Trump. On fait appel, oui, au gouvernement canadien, mais moi, je parle aux Américains également. Est-ce que les États-Unis sont riches et reconnus et puissants comme ça parce qu'ils ont toujours intimidé le reste de la planète? La réponse, c'est non. Donc là, eux aussi doivent se lever. L'armée américaine, tous les gens qui siègent au gouvernement américain doivent dire assez, c'est assez. Et c'est ça, dans le fond, le cri du cœur aujourd'hui.
Puis, quand même, je vous relance sur les pertes d'emploi dans la dernière année, aussi dans une région, Ottawa-Gatineau, où on parle beaucoup des fonctionnaires, 40 000 postes. Le travail des syndicats n'a pas empêché ces compressions-là de la part du gouvernement fédéral. Donc, encore une fois, est-ce qu'il n'y a pas un échec d'une certaine façon qui est attribuable aux syndicats, alors que ça fait plus d'1 an qu'on est dans ces circonstances-là?
Je veux juste dire que ce n'est pas le syndicat qui congédie.
Non, mais je vais y aller. Écoutez, c'est toujours facile d'accuser le syndicat quand quelque chose va mal. C'est pas le syndicat qui décide de faire ces coupes-là. C'est pas nous qui disons au gouvernement, c'est une bonne idée de déréglementer. C'est une bonne idée d'amener un fardeau supplémentaire sur tous les contribuables canadiens qui ont besoin des filets sociaux, des entreprises, des PME, des grandes entreprises qui ont besoin de l'aide de nos gouvernements, ont besoin d'avoir un être humain qui répond au téléphone. C'est absolument pas ce qu'on dit, mais ça fait combien de temps que les gouvernements cassent du sucre sur les travailleurs de l'État? C'est comme si à chaque fois que ça va mal dans un budget, que ce soit au niveau fédéral ou provincial, c'est toujours dû à la main-d'œuvre. Et malheureusement, la population canadienne souvent embarque dans cette propagande-là. Donc ça, c'est pas nouveau. Le gouvernement, moi, j'ai parlé avec Mark Carney qui me disait non, les impacts, on parle de 10 ce ne sera pas autant de la main-d'œuvre que des programmes qui sont plus en œuvre. Mais là, force est de constater que ce n'est pas le résultat sur le terrain actuellement.
Other questions, and for whom?
Hi.
From Canadian Press.
Hi, this is Kyle Duggan from the Canadian Press. Question for Bia and for Lana. Do you feel that the Mark Carney government is being transparent and communicative enough with Labor about how it's going about its trade negotiations with the Trump administration in the lead up to the CUSMA renewal process?
I think you're hearing from my group here that we're not thinking that we are getting enough focus and enough labor participation in the decisions that are being made and in the consequences that those decisions have. And so calling on us to have a meeting and to give us information after the fact or to bring us in as a box checking exercise is not nearly sufficient. Workers in this country deserve better. They need to be at the decision-making tables because the decisions that are being made by the negotiators absolutely have consequences for workers and their families.
So I try not to feel because, there's too much going on in this world right now. I mean, the reality is that we can't go into this CUSMA review with one hand tied behind our back. And if workers are not part of this process, we will have one hand tied behind our back. And I don't think that's in anybody's best interest. Workers know a lot about the industries that they work in. We know where the give and take can be. We know where a possible deal can be. And we also know how to negotiate. That's kind of what we do for a living. So yeah, it's to everyone's benefit to make sure that workers are at the table, that unions are at the table, and that industry is there. We all have to be there to make sure that we get a true Team Canada approach to how we get through this trade war. Absolutely.
Thank you. I also have a question to Marty. The sense that I'm getting is that the sectoral tariffs aren't going to be lifted until the CUSMA renewal process is done. So are you prepared to deal with these sectoral tariffs for another 6 months and another year as these negotiations drag out? And what's kind of your message to the government on that front?
Well, are we prepared? Would we want that? Absolutely not. But as you've heard today, we are big believers as well. Better no deal than a bad deal. And as we're starting to take steps, especially in the steel industry, to take back some of the domestic market, to then create our domestic producers a market to sell to. When this all started, I think 65% of the steel in Canada came from foreign steel. So there's an avenue for steel to take back some of that domestic market to work their way through this. Really concerned about our forestry sector. That is different. But again, I think the answer to your question is, yeah, we're going to have to be, to get to the deal that sets up our kids and grandkids and future generations than to take a half-assed deal and pay the price for the next 10 years. So thank you.
And what happens if that deal is CUSMA itself and Trump decides to walk away?
Well, that's good question. I think the tariffs and the CUSMA all get floated together as we work through CUSMA. We then work on the 232 stuff. If he walks away from it, to me, some of it as a Canadian, as a union person, it is what it is. We're going to diversify our market. We're going to trip, we're going to fall, we're going to scrape our knees. But for the sake of our kids and grandkids, we're going to rebuild, we're going to diversify and create, as we've all talked about today, an economy, a Canadian economy that's resilient and protects their sovereignty. So that would be my thoughts on that.